Welcome to the Christian Woman Leadership Podcast, where we hope to inspire you to embrace your God-given gifts, skills, and passions in order to lead with confidence. I'm your host, Esther Littlefield, a pastor's wife, business owner, mom, and writer. My co-host is Holly Kane, and together we chat about important issues that Christian women leaders face. In addition, we interview other women just like you who lead in various roles, from church to community to business. Through this podcast, we offer you encouragement, tools, and resources to help you on your leadership journey. We're so glad you're here with us. Hi, friend. I'm so glad you're joining me for this conversation today. And today I am speaking with Jenny Randle. Jenny is a faith-based speaker, creative entrepreneur, founder of Freedom Creatives, and the author of Courageous Creative. She has a deep passion to empower people and businesses to live with impact and loves a good freestyle rap battle with her husband and kids. I love that. So welcome to the show, Jenny. I'm glad to have you here.
Hey, thanks for having me on.
Awesome. All right. So Jenny, let's jump right in and talk about your leadership journey. I'd love to hear kind of how you have gone through your life and recognized your leadership throughout your life.
Yeah, so I guess you sent me the questions a little bit beforehand, so I was thinking through this, and there were those moments in my timeline of life that is like, oh yeah, I can see here, people saw the leadership on my life. So, I can trace it back to fourth grade when I ran. I don't know if we were doing like a student council thing in our class, but it was something where I was like, oh, I should run for this. And I ran against the class clown, which come on. So I ended up winning, but it was by a little amount that I won. And I remember, I don't know if it was my mom or dad, but they were like, well, who did you vote for? And I said, I voted for the class clown because I felt bad for him. And I don't know which parent said it, but they're like, if you don't believe in yourself enough to vote for yourself, then you shouldn't be running. And it was a moment that I was like, oh, there were moments like that throughout my childhood where they were raising me up as a leader because they saw it in me, and they just like those gold nuggets of like wisdom that I was like, oh yeah, that makes sense. So I later ran in high school, and the race was close, but I voted for myself and I won. So it was just all throughout childhood and into adulthood. I've been in different leadership positions, whether in ministry or having our own businesses, and just I love championing people, Christians, believers, into their calling for Jesus. And that's really where I love focusing on mostly.
Okay, yeah. So tell us what your leadership looks like currently in your life right now.
Yeah. So currently, my husband and I, we have 2 kids. So, discipling them daily, that's a daily leadership task.
Oh, yeah.
For sure. So that's a priority. And then I call my husband Hot Surfer Husband. Hot Surfer Husband and I, his real name is Matt. He and I, we run a business together. We run a digital marketing agency. And then alongside with that, we also run our ministry called Freedom Creatives. So leading both of those, I tend to function in the role of creative strategy. I can carry vision. I can cast vision. And then Matt, Hot Server Husband, does the very logical, like research, the practical side of the business, where I think my job's fun. He thinks his job's fun. So it's like a perfect meld of leadership and greatness. I think we've really found our groove and where we fit in, not only as being married, but in running these businesses too. So it's been fun over the last couple of years to kind of see us settle into those roles and really take ownership over them.
Yeah, that's amazing. I love it when you can work together in harmony like that.
Yeah.
Especially
Yeah.
when you're married, that can be very challenging, but it can also be very rewarding. So,
Yeah. It's been a battle of me being like, why don't you dream? And it's like, I think at one point he's like, I think you carry enough dreams for the both of us. Like, so, and it's just not the way he's wired. Like, we're wired so differently. So when God convicted me and I actually paid attention, to when I was able to like let go of the expectation of, well, he needs to look like this because this is what I look like. Why doesn't he? So when I was able to let go of that, and I think that's a leadership lesson for all of us and the teams we're raising and the people we're investing in, is like, we're not wired the same, thank God, because
Yeah.
we couldn't function.
Mhm.
And so letting go of those expectations of how we're supposed to function in the workplace and in marriages and in every space, really.
Yeah, yeah. So since you've talked about just recognizing how you're wired, what has helped you along that journey of discovering how you're wired and how you've been able to accept that?
Yeah. So I took actually a couple months ago. Well, I've taken the DISC assessment before, but I think it changes in the stage of life you're in. So I took it recently. I had a mentor, Dr. Webster, with Spirit and Word Ministries. He challenged me to take it. So I took it again. And along with it, I took the Fivefold Ministry Survey and also another survey called Heights Spiritual Gifts Survey. So I took all three of those, and he took about a couple hours, sat down with me, and just walked through the way I was wired. And Esther, I cannot tell you the way it freed me up to walk in the areas I'm supposed to walk. Like it makes me get emotional because to have somebody affirm, like especially as
Mhm.
a woman, to have somebody affirm you are meant to lead, you like the vision you carry can shift a room, like just him going through the DISC assessment. And because I'm a high D and a high I,
Yeah.
so him going through that, like you're a high level leader who carries strategy, but when you're overwhelmed, you make a to-do list that doesn't actually have to get done. And I learned that the day after. This is so embarrassing. I learned that lesson the day after I sent my publishers. I'm a first time author. I sent my publishers a to-do list like a mile long. And because the book was launching in like a couple months. And it was like that embarrassing walk of shame where the next day I was like, I just learned about my personality. And when I'm stressed, I make a really long to-do list because I think it's something I can control. I'm so sorry. Let's ignore everything I just said. And they were so gracious and kind. But now I'm self-aware. I know that about myself. If I'm making a to-do list, I'm like, do I really, what am I really supposed to say yes to? What can I let go of? So just the freedom and that Heights Spiritual Gift Survey, like just having the freedom to know where God has gifted me and placed me. It seriously, game changer, game
Mm,
changer.
that's amazing. I love that.
Yeah.
It does make such a difference, especially when we can accept how God has wired us and embrace that instead of like push against it or try to become something different.
Yeah. And
So,
wrestling against it. That was always the thing. Um, because it's like, you're too much, like just step back. And it's like, well, knowing that made me be like, okay, I might be too much for some people, but I'm what God, I'm like designed for this kind of stuff,
yeah.
you
Yeah.
know? And having a husband that gives me space to dream and like gives me space to cast vision into stuff and like really like I'll travel around the nation ministering and he'll be like, okay, I got the kids, you go. And like, this is where you're called to step into like the support. And that's not traditional for a lot of people, but
Mhm.
just the freedom in that it's been amazing.
Yeah.
So rewarding. And I
Love
and I
that.
hope that for all the leaders, like they
Mhm.
find their people that not only champion them, but that they can come alongside and give them space too to walk freely in how God wired them.
Mm, yeah. That's a beautiful thing when it happens.
When it happens.
Yeah. Yeah. So,
Can I ask you a
oh
question?
yeah. Yeah,
Has that
sure.
been a struggle for you? Because you said when it happens, has that been a big battle?
I think I've seen it in a lot of situations for sure in other
Yeah.
people's, and I know it's we talked about this on an episode about marriage actually, where my husband was on, and then my co-host and her husband were on.
Oh,
And in
fun.
my marriage, I am more a go-getter, more kind of lots of ideas, lots of things to do, and my husband is more laid back. And
Yeah.
so sometimes that can be a tension point because, like you said, it's not always the traditional
Yeah.
role. And like I'm more of a step up and get stuff done leader, and he's more of a like observe. He's still a leader, but it's just,
Yeah.
it looks different. So I feel like we've figured it out in our marriage how to support each other and do that, but I don't think that always happens, especially
Yeah.
for the women. So
Yeah.
I agree with you that we need to do that
Yeah.
regardless of gender. So
Yep.
yeah.
So good.
Awesome. So can you tell me if there's been any other specific life events that have contributed to you becoming a leader? You talked about your parents encouraging you early on. Were there any other things that happened throughout your life that maybe have contributed to your leadership development?
Yeah, in 10th grade, there was this, I was in public school and there was a leadership weekend, and I got asked to go on that. And it just was the first time that a teacher was actively pouring into that in my life. So that was just, and I love like overanalyzing why we are the way we are and like how we work, and so that was like so fun for
Hmm.
me as a high schooler. And I've just, yeah, that was really the kickoff of people pouring into that for me. There was a coach in high school my senior year. I played field hockey, and I was horrible at it, the worst. And I remember the coach being like, "Oh, I really want you to be captain." And usually the captain's the best on the team. And I remember she was like, "How do I, cuz it's a vote." And she's like, "How do I get people to vote for you to be captain? Like, what do we," cuz she saw that on my life. And I don't remember. I think maybe there were 3 captains. I don't actually remember if I was captain, but just the fact that she saw that on me. And
Yeah.
but the thing that was cool is that you can lead and not be the most excellent in that space, because you know how to call that out in other people. And
Mm,
I think a lot of times in leadership, we think we have to be an expert in every area, when in reality, you have to know how to recognize the experts in the areas and bring that out in them.
yeah. So true. So have you had mentors that have guided you along this journey as well?
Yeah, the Dr. Webster, who I mentioned, he has been instrumental mentor in my life, and literally, it's just been a few hours of his investment in believing in in me, and just to have him be like, "Yeah, you're a woman who can run a ministry." Like, just for him to say that, like,
Mhm.
I'm done. Like, sign me up. Let's be best friends. So he has been really instrumental in the things I'm walking in now. And then there's a woman named Mimi who has just been like, like, keep going, keep writing, stop overanalyzing stuff, just do it. She's been really instrumental. And my parents, my dad leads by example. My mom leads more quietly but strong. So seeing their different leadership has been instrumental. And then of course my pastors, I go to a church called Redeemer Church, and here in New York, and we have 5 churches, and but it's like one big united vision.
Yeah.
And to have the pastors just be available for questions and like see how God is using me in this season, and just help that, and like even giving space for the gifts within the church, like specifically like prophecy or like words of knowledge, like that type of leadership stuff.
Mm,
They have created space for that, and have intentionally pulled that out of people, and that has been really powerful and rewarding as well.
mm. Yeah, that's amazing.
Yeah.
So what about your faith? You just mentioned church. So how has your faith impacted your leadership over the years?
I think my faith has just impacted it because it's the lens through which I view everything, right?
Mhm.
So, um, I we in our marketing business, we run mostly, um, our clients are mostly influencers and leaders in the digital space. So they're like self-help. Um, and I love it because we'll be working on stuff and I'll pray over the projects, and like I feel like God will give me wisdom about like, oh, focus on this, or like let this go, or here's an idea here. And I think in our leadership, Holy Spirit is always speaking and moving and wants to be invited into our process of developing content or whatever the case may be. And so actively going after that, I think, is
Mm,
huge. And so I've seen it everything in everything on my leadership, my
mhm.
faith. And I think also recognizing our God-given creativity, for me to walk through that journey of, okay, we're all created to be creative. What does that look like? Because it looks different for everybody. What does it
Mhm.
look like to make stuff? Because that's the definition I like to use for
Yeah.
creativity, making stuff. What am I making? That's how I'm being creative. And now, how can I continue to fight for that God-given creative nature? Because I think it is a fight. I think I think our creativity as a leader is the greatest weapon that we can carry. And I think a lot of the times self-doubt gets in the way, or perfectionism, or performance mentality, or comparison. There's so many different things.
Mm.
And I think our faith comes into play, specifically for me, when I have to karate chop through the pain or the shame or the guilt or whatever in fighting for that creative nature, because I believe we're meant to be influencers and leaders, especially just in whatever sphere we're in. We're meant to be a leader in that sphere as a believer. And I think our creativity and fighting for that is one of the greatest things we can do.
Mm. Yeah. So you wrote a book about creativity.
Yes.
So I know that's part of your message that you're bringing to the world as a leader, right? So can you tell us what are some of the things that we as leaders can do to, you just talked about it, we're fighting for this creativity. So what are some of the practical things that leaders can do to practice creativity or to fight for it in their lives?
Yeah. So being self aware, first of all, that you are created to create. And don't put yourself in a box thinking that, okay, Jenny said I'm creative. I'm going to go paint a picture. Like, your creative expression looks different. Everyone is uniquely wired and it looks different. And so giving yourself that knowledge that you are supposed to be creative, right? So that's the first step. Acknowledge that. And then the other step is inviting Holy Spirit into your process, seeing God working and entering into the story of what He's doing too. It's not always about you and your leadership, but it's about being actively saying, God, what are you doing? Rather than, God, will you help me do this? I think that's a perspective shift we can all carry. And then just being self-aware and being like, God, why can't I get past this idea? Like, what is it about this idea that I keep coming back to? Is this an idea you want me to pursue?
Mm.
And then if it's yes, go after it. If it's a no, then be like, okay, well, why are you giving this idea? And like, if he's asking you to let it go, let it go. And also, even seeing the creativity on other people in the teams you run or lead, or the family you're investing in, like seeing the leadership and the creativity on them, and asking God, okay, this person definitely has the gift of worship on their life. How I am not a worship leader, but how can I cultivate that gift in them? Maybe for a season, it's investing in resources for them. Maybe it's giving them the tools and equipment where they can go take a course, or show them in church where they can steward that gifting, and really just being intentional to see the creativity in yourself, in others, and then just being self-aware to what's blocking it, and then just go after it.
Mm. Okay. So why do you feel that creativity is important in our lives as believers?
I mean, it's how we influence the world. I mean, that you have the entertainment industry, you have the music industry, you have the fashion industry. Like, the outlets that are influencing culture are those creative industries.
Mhm.
And I'm not saying we all need to be drawing pictures of doves and the face of Jesus. Like, if that's your thing, that's great, but it
Yeah.
doesn't always look like that for everybody. So go into the mainstream spaces, influence the people around in those spaces, like glorify God in your work. And it's not always like, our creative calling isn't for always for what we're putting out, like what we're producing. It's about who we're producing with around
Mm.
us, and who
Mhm.
we get to influence then too. So I remember there was this one moment. I worked in the entertainment industry as an editor, and we had to deliver this rough cut to the studios, and our hard drives died. Everything died. We lost everything. This was
Oh,
months
no.
of work. It was horrible.
Mm.
And it was stressful. Obviously, I cried. Let's just be
Mhm.
honest. I cried. I put my head on the desk. I put
Mm.
my hood up. Like, I'm the person that if you have your hood up, like, don't talk to me. This is serious.
Yeah.
serious. So I went in the zone of self-pity and what is happening. And then I like probably got Diet Pepsi and was like, this is the worst. And then I was like, okay, wait, we can do this. Like, Jesus, help me, like, not freak out in this moment. And our team rebuilt everything. I think we held the record of working 72 hours straight. Like, they brought up, people were bringing us in food. There was a shower in the office, so we didn't turn into the smelly kids, but we got the job done. And it was fine. But months go by and I go to leave, transition out of that job. And one of the producers came up to me and she was like, I just want to tell you that you made me believe in Jesus. And she was an atheist before this point.
Wow.
And we didn't have this altar call moment of let me lay hands on you and like say this prayer. But it was a moment that marked my timeline in life, because you can look back at those moments at work or when you're leading and just be like, I had a moment there to respond by glorifying God with my attitude, or
Yeah.
by enjoying God in the way I'm going to respond to the situation, and just being the light in the workplace. And that speaks volumes rather than me giving her an altar call moment. And Holy Spirit used those moments and it made an impact. And she went on to continue to producing, and she's making a difference in the entertainment industry. So God, I believe, is positioning leaders strategically in these different spheres of influence, because he knows that they're going to walk in obedience. They're going to let their light shine because they have a concept that they're meant to be creative. They have a concept in their identity, like we were talking about earlier with those personality assessments.
Mm-hmm.
They have a concept of how God has wired them, and they're in the position to lead people well because they understand their identity in Christ, and others are going to connect with that and connect with Jesus because of it. Isn't that crazy? I love talking about this stuff.
That's awesome, because I have another question about this. And I think that a lot of times in conversations about work, we differentiate between our ministry and our work, or
Yeah.
our ministry and our business, And so what's your perspective on that? How do you separate ministry from business, or ministry from work? Or I would just love to hear your thoughts on that.
Yeah. So our ministry, I'm using quotes for the
Yeah.
listeners. Our ministry is a 501c3. It's a nonprofit. So it is a separate entity from our marketing company.
Yep.
And it's been this wrestling match of how do they overlap? What does this look like? And the physical ministry does not overlap with our marketing company. But I believe the ministry of being the hands and feet of Jesus do overlap with the marketing company.
Right.
You know what I mean? So
Yeah.
just from a purely like aesthetic and like marketing thing, I do not brand them together. Like my Instagram is my ministry page, and like we've never actually had to do marketing for a marketing company, which thank you, Jesus, because that makes it easy.
Yeah.
But so we've haven't merged in that way, but I believe they're kind of just intertwined naturally. And I've had people say, why isn't your ministry your marketing? Like, why aren't they combined? And we specifically, our clients are in the mainstream spaces.
Mm-hmm.
And if I were to say, we only help faith-based people, or we serve Christians, then that's a totally different company. And we feel called to keep that in the mainstream space at this
Yeah.
time.
Right. So I think what I'm hearing you say is that Christians can be in the mainstream, or should be in the mainstream if God has called them there, and that can, being there can still be a ministry, even though it's
Oh,
not
100.
a quote unquote official ministry like a 501c3, like you were saying.
Yeah.
Your work in that space can still minister to people.
Yeah. I believe wholeheartedly, if you are a believer, you have a ministry. And
Yes.
it's in the everyday minutes of your life. Are you glorifying and enjoying God? That is our purpose. And your physical job may be different from mine, but we're all on the same mission, you know? And it's just like taking the grandiose of what is my calling, and just making it simple. Like our pastor taught on purpose one day, and it shifted everything for me because I do carry such vision. So when he's like, okay, our purpose is to glorify God, I'm like, oh, that is so easy. Not that it's easy. Of course,
Yeah.
every day it's like, what do you, but, but it's easier than writing 700 books and you know what I mean? Like it takes that pressure off.
Yeah. The pressure
And
of trying to find the one thing that
yeah,
you're,
or chase that
right.
big dream, and it
Hmm.
takes the pressure off. And all we have to do is show up. And if God says, go over there and talk to that person, just be willing to do it. Or have a good attitude when your computer blows up in your face. Like, like just show up
Yeah.
and bring him glory. And I think I struggle with, because I love investing in believers. And I think a lot of people struggle. Well, I'm not like a pastor, or I'm not a leader in the church. So how do I function as a Christian? Like, how does that work? And I think it works by understanding your creative nature, understanding the power you have through Jesus in your workplace to just show up and see how he uses you, and being open to being used. I think more than ever, we have to step into the uncomfortable areas of leadership. I think as Christians, we need to be the ones leading these large organizations that are influencing the world, whether they're Christian or not. I don't care. Like,
Hmm.
if you're a leader and you can step into those places, you should be the one making the decisions. You should be the ones downloading strategy from God if he gives it to you, and implementing it for your teams and raising up leaders underneath you. Like, that is how culture changes, is when we go into those areas where it seems dark, when we can enter in and be like, you know what, this is about serving God, and he's calling me to go into this uncomfortable area. And it might not look like a standard quote unquote ministry, but it is a ministry, and it might be hard work. It might be uncomfortable. You might have to battle for stuff. I remember I was in this boardroom meeting. I'm on a board of a local organization here, and there were these two lawyers, and I love them, and they were presenting something to the board, and they were passionate about it, and they were telling a story, and they were getting emotional, and they were fighting. They were like, justice, like this moment. And then this one woman paused. She laid out the case. Like, I was sold. She did a dramatic pause. I mean, I say that dramatically, but she paused, and then she said, but that's just my feelings. You can do what you want to. And I like dramatically slammed my hand on the table. And I think as women specifically, in a place of leadership, your voice carries power. And I think a lot of the times, especially a lot of the times, we can diminish our voice because we either don't think we're of equal value, or, well, that's just my opinion. And I think I want to just challenge everyone listening, like, God has given you a voice, and it's time we have to use it. And if you are in a high place of leadership, you need to place high value on your God-given voice, because there is a reason you are in the place you are meant to be in, and walk confidently, not in yourself. There's one thing to be self-confident. It doesn't matter about your accolades. It doesn't matter about your awards. It's not about people's praise, but it's walking in a God confidence in who he's called you to be. Actually, it's not even about who he's called you to be. It's about who he is.
Yeah.
This is like gospel, like who God is, and then walking confidently in the areas he's sending you. And I think especially women in the leadership, they need to place value on their voice and step into the dark areas where they're called to lead, and lead powerfully, and don't ever, ever diminish your voice. And I've done that plenty of times, where I have shrunk back and said, oh, well, say similar, oh, it's just how I feel, do what you want. But no, God, I think more than ever, God is equipping leaders, creatives, and men and women to use their voice
Yeah.
powerfully for him to influence culture and change in businesses, change in the world around us, because that's how it's going to get done.
Mm, love everything you shared. And it's completely that whole point that you shared about confidence is the foundation of this podcast and what I
So
believe,
good.
that it really is about what God is doing, and that we are part of it, and he's putting us in places wherever that might be, whether it's at home raising your 3 kids, or whether it's in a boardroom, as the CEO, whatever it is. So
Yeah,
he has that set up for us, but we
man.
have to
Well,
step up.
we have to step out. And Esther, your resources and this podcast is so instrumental in empowering people to do that. So thank you for, I know how hard it is to create a podcast week after week after week. Like there's so much, I'm sure, on your to-do list. And I know it's such a sacrifice of your time. And I just want to like publicly shout it from the rooftops. Like, I'm proud of you. I'm so thankful for you. And you're leading up strong women to say, yes, here I am, God, like, let's do this thing. So thank you for your investment.
Thank you, Jenny, for saying that. I really appreciate that.
Yeah.
It's definitely a lot of work. So
Let me ask you. So
yeah.
where can we go full like vulnerability for a moment?
Oh, we can.
Okay. I saw you get a little emotional.
Yeah.
Is it because people aren't saying that enough to you, or you're just tired, or like what was behind that feeling?
I think whenever someone affirms me like that, it makes me get emotional.
Yeah.
It's an affirmation that I'm doing what God has laid on my heart because someone else is agreeing with me on that.
Yeah.
So I appreciate that. And I was actually going to ask you about vulnerability next. So that's kind of
Yeah.
funny that you brought it up.
Oh, cool.
Um,
Can I just say one thing?
yeah.
I love how you just processed through that, because I think as believers, we need to always be encouraging each other in the
Mm,
callings we have. I can't tell you how many times I've gotten a text at the right time when I'm like, oh my gosh, someone's like, hey, keep going. And it's like,
yes.
yeah, thank you. And so, all the listeners, here's our challenge to you. Prayerfully ask God, like, who can you encourage today in their calling? And then just shoot them a text or like give them a call, because it takes what, 30 seconds to affirm somebody, and it can shift everything for them.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think this completely relates to what we're talking about with creativity because as a creator, so as a podcaster, as a blogger, when you put yourself out there, you are opening yourself up to all sorts of whatever, anybody's opinions, anybody can leave a review, anybody can leave a comment. And so there's an aspect of vulnerability as a creative. So what are some of the things that you would recommend to someone who is, you're encouraging people to be creators, but yet they have to be willing to be vulnerable to be a creator, right?
Yeah.
How can we do that and not succumb to letting all the opinions of others affect us?
Yeah. Whew, that is a work in progress. So there's a couple of things. In my book, I wrote about being redemptively vulnerable. And I think we have opportunity to create from pain and put our stuff out there. And then we also have opportunity to create from a pain we've processed through and we've seen God in and we've seen him redeem, right?
Yeah.
So creating from that space is so much more healthier from creating from the space of, I'm going to spill my guts, but I'm still figuring it out. So
Mhm.
I always like to urge leaders to create from the redemptively vulnerable space of, I've seen God in this. This is what it looks like. I found his redemption in this messy moment. So creating from that space is really the healthy way to do that. And studies even show when you create from that darkness or like that pain of depression, it doesn't go, your creativity doesn't go as far as if you were to create from a more happy, positive
Mm,
place. And finding God in the midst of the pain and the hurt, it's a wrestling match, but you find him because he's so faithful and he's always working in us and through us. And we're always in process. So taking the challenge to find him in that and then producing content or writing or blogging, podcasting from the redemptive side of things goes way much farther. And you've already seen the outcome. So when you're getting attacked, if you do on social, or if people are being like, oh my gosh, how could you do, like,
yeah.
you're already secure in the outcome
Yeah.
because God loves you. You've wrestled through it. You've found your faith has hopefully strengthened because of it. And you can hold tightly onto that rather than other people's opinions. I have to tell you, I got a 1-star review on Courageous Creative. Oh my gosh. And I remember seeing it and I'm like, okay, Jesus, I can do this. And I read the 1-star review and it was like, it was actually, I'm actually really proud of the review because it was like, this book is all about Jesus.
Yeah.
And they just didn't know it was a Christian book. So I saw the review and I'm like, awesome. I really like that review. And if I was unhealthily creative, I would have been so broken and like, this person doesn't like me, like so wounded. And of
Mhm.
course, we're all in process. So I have days where stuff affects me. One woman called me out on something publicly, and I was like, this is really awkward. And
Mm.
I let that define me, like shrink back my voice when in reality, she was struggling through really heavy stuff. And she just put that on me because she was in her own struggle.
Mhm.
So just noticing that everyone is all in process and like you have to hold things so loosely and not let them define who you are. Because if
Yeah.
you're letting other people's criticism or feedback define you, then you're not going to get anything done.
Yeah.
And of course, there's a time and a place for accountability. That's different. You know, like the people we
Yes.
trust and the people we respect, like they have that space to speak into our life. But
Right.
not the haters. We don't got time for that.
Yeah. So true. Yes. Okay, so Jenny, I want to go back to creativity for a minute and ask you, can you share some maybe non-traditional creative outlets that you have seen people act, you know, serving in or doing? Because I think when we think of creativity, I think of arts, the arts and the music industry, but I think from your perspective, it's much more than that.
It's much more, yeah. You get me. It's much more than that. Yeah, just anytime you make stuff, you're being creative. So my husband's a former engineer, like putting those things, I don't even know, putting stuff together and math equations I have no comprehension of, like that's super creative. Teaching is creative in the way you're communicating to your classroom or even the activities you're leading your class through is so creative. If you are in business, especially a leader in business, you're developing strategy, you're communicating daily with your teams, you're positioning the right people in creative ways. So that's also being creative. If you're cooking for your kids, I mean, how many frozen pizzas can I serve them a week? Like you have to creatively think of something new or something like you can be creative in the way you cook. And I want to say as a parent, there are daily routines and rhythms that you have where you can invite your kids in to be creative too, or even enter into their space of when they're creating. So that too is another avenue of being creative. So like if you're gardening, like bring the kids with you. That's something that you do naturally. You're intentionally being creative and have fun gardening. Like that's another way of being creative. So I think it's noticing and being intentional to go after the areas where you are creating stuff and recognizing, oh yeah, I am creative, and expanding on the areas in which you carry interest and that God has like kind of been like, yeah, do this, and then stepping into it confidently.
Mm, okay. What do you think are some of the benefits of being creative as leaders?
I think you get better results. I know you get better results because you're not limiting your team's ability. You're giving them space to think outside of the box. Like we'll have meetings where it's like, let's just like say the most ridiculous stuff we can think of. And like, but that's how your brain starts like playing off of one another. And then at the end, you're like, you have this really great idea that would have never been developed if you were just like, okay, what, like so rigid or like rules and regulations. So developing creativity in your team really produces higher results because you're trusting your team first of all to show up, and you're giving them space to process through stuff. And I mean, I think all the like big organizations, I'm thinking specifically Google or Apple, they'll have like a day which just like freedom day, and like you just get to go create or build out like different code. I don't know the technical terms, but you know what I mean? Like
Yeah.
they just are like, just go and do. Or I know one of the companies I was studying, they were like, let's just go serve in our community. And they were being creative in that way. But you're in the community seeing areas and seeing areas that you can fill a void or that you can serve in. And that's getting you being creative and thinking in new ways and like thinking in different demographics even. So creativity to explore in business is huge, especially in leadership, just to champion people to be like, why don't you try giving up ownership of stuff as a leader and saying, why don't you try that, goes a really long way, because you're empowering people beneath you to rise up to a challenge, and they'll do it. We just have to say, give them that opportunity.
Yeah. And not to edit or discount any of the ideas when you're in that mode, right? Because I've
Yeah.
seen meetings where it's like brainstorming, but then all of a sudden someone has, oh, but that won't work because, and then that just shuts down the creativity right then and there.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. Don't buzzkill those ideas.
yeah, yeah.
Give them
Okay.
room to breathe, at least.
Mm-hmm.
At least
Exactly.
24 hours. That's what I like to do. Like, I'll finish up a project and I will, if I have the time in the schedule, I'll just sit on it. We'll just sit and wait and give it space to breathe, because usually the next day I'll look at it and I'll be like, oh, we should tweak this. Or like, it's a different perspective when you can give stuff room to breathe.
I was just going to ask you how you think that like rest or white space plays a role in creativity. So that kind of goes along with what you just said.
Yeah. I think it's huge. I mean, studies actually show if you go for a walk in silence, so don't bring those podcasts with you. Um, if you go for a walk in silence, like it produces your creative output by 60%.
Wow.
And I think it's just like being out in nature, the source, right? Right. God is the ultimate
Mhm.
creator. We're putting ourselves out there, and just like your brain can just start. And I always say, bring a notebook or bring something so you can jot those things down. Because I think I have the most genius ideas, and you're like, I'm never gonna forget this. This is the best genius. This is gonna go like, it's done. I changed the world. And then 5 minutes later, you're like, what was that idea?
Yes. Oh, that's the worst feeling.
I'm sure. Have you had that happen?
Oh, definitely. Yeah. Yeah.
All the
'Cause it,
time.
yeah.
So I met a pastor once who was like, I invented bottled water, and I was like, what? And he's like, I mean, in my head, and then I forgot the idea, and then it came out 5 years later. But really, that idea was mine. I was like,
That's awesome.
well, so I think a lot of times, actually, God will give us these creative ideas, and maybe he's just giving us, it might seem like a silly entrepreneurial idea or like engineering something, but maybe it's an idea that it might seem silly, but maybe he's doing it to bring in another income stream into your life, so you can produce other stuff. Like, I think a lot of times we'll underestimate those quote
Yeah.
unquote silly ideas,
Mhm.
because they don't hold this divine kingdom purpose, when it's like,
Yeah.
maybe God's just doing it so you can get some resource all up in your face. Like, I don't know why, but like, maybe
Yeah.
we should be a little more risky to step into those
Mhm.
unknowns and
And
those
I
ideas.
think sometimes we think like work or business has to be super hard or something we hate
Yeah.
instead of something that could actually be fun and that we could love.
Yes.
Right? And
Yeah.
so when I started doing work that I loved, it really changed the game for me.
Mhm. I agree fully. And I think nowadays, especially, we can do the work we love.
Yeah.
We're not going to love I don't like
Oh,
to
right.
do this. Like, we're not going to love every single, but because of the digital space, because of people can work remotely, like, we can, if God's calling us to step into these unknown areas and do something, like, just take a risk and do it. I think a lot of times we limit ourselves because it seems outside of the box, when in reality it's not.
Yeah.
And I love that you said that. That's so good.
Awesome. All right, Jenny. So one of the challenges that some of us have, and then maybe you're one of them, is that we are multi-passionate. And that's not necessarily a challenge, but it's kind of just a feature of our
Yeah.
lives as women. And we're juggling a lot of things. So
Yep.
you have a business with your husband, you are a wife, you're a mom, and then you have your ministry as well. So how are you practically managing all your responsibilities on a day-to-day basis?
Oh man, I wish I knew. Um, well, in the perfect world, I would have more white space, like you said before. But specifically, I would fill that space with Jesus, because I know when I do that, the other things tend to fall into place the way they're supposed to.
Mm,
So, as a high DI person, which means I can get stuff done. I tend to work too much. And I have had to be really intentional to turn off my computer when the weekend hits and like not enter the office.
Yeah.
I've had to ask people to hold me accountable. Like, are you, whatever I need to set up to do it all, because I'm not doing it all.
Mhm.
But I've had to set up those healthy boundaries so I can feel a little peace in this whole thing. Right. Um, and I think the biggest lesson is to see the areas that I'm gifted in and then delegate all the other stuff. If we have finances to do that, specifically in our business, delegate all the other stuff so my brain can function. Like, so for me, I love doing creative strategy. I don't want to do a 7-page to-do list. I'll make a 7-page to-do list, but I don't want to do it. But I
Yep.
want to find the right person that loves to do that. So
Yep.
it's delegating the areas in which aren't my favorite and giving somebody that opportunity. Because too, as a business owner, you're blessing people by bringing them onto your team. And in our business, you get to work from home because the internet, right? So
Yeah.
except when it goes out and the whole world dies.
Oh man,
like
when
yesterday,
Facebook and Instagram go down, it's not a good thing.
I know. I'm like, man, my business really should, yeah. So we're focusing on growing our email list much, much.
Yeah.
But yeah, I don't really have an answer to that other than just the best lesson I learned on balancing all the things was I was at a speaker writer conference, and this one woman leader was like, I mean, when I first got into this, my kids were in preschool, and it just punched me in the face, like in the best way possible. She's like, every day you have to hold so tentatively, and every day just start and be like, Jesus, Holy Spirit, what do you want me to focus on today? And I started doing that. And someday it was like, just who cares about your to-do list? Like, go play with your kids. Like, they need you. Like, go build Legos. That's fun. And some days it was like, send your book proposal to 700 people. Not that much, but you know what I mean? Like, some days it
Yeah.
was work days and some days it was play days. And they're all wonderful. But it's just asking God, like, what do you want me to do with my time? And how can I honor you in this?
Mm.
That's the biggest lesson I've learned. It is a struggle, and I've had to set up boundaries of like, stop working.
Yeah. Yeah. I
But
think a lot of our listeners can relate to that as
yeah,
I can as well. And I think it's, I don't know, I've worked a traditional 9 to 5 and then I've worked from home. I think it's harder when you work from home or when you own your own
yes,
business because you are basically at all times, you have the ability to do the work, right?
yeah,
And
that's so
it's not like
true.
you don't have to go into the office and have the things there. It's all at your fingertips. So it's harder to set those boundaries.
That's a really good point. Yeah, it's because it's always there, and you always feel like you're on call. I've started to actually wording things in the morning, like, "Okay, I'm going into the office," and I take 2 steps. Okay, I am now in the office. Like, just even changing the language. Like,
Yep.
okay, my office hours are 8 to 4 or whatever, and just like being intentional. And at first, it's like a training process. At first, it's hard. It seems hard and like uncomfortable, but the world's not going to end if you don't answer an email.
Yeah.
So it's understanding those rhythms and like boundaries and yeah, stepping
Yes.
back and being
Yeah.
at peace with that is really huge. My
Mhm.
husband's we have different work philosophies. He's very logical, very well with his time. He would rather I'm a little squirrely with my time. So he is so wise in that he can get an hour's work of work done like and be done for the day. Whereas I'll squirrel around. Like, oh, I just found this great article on the internet. Oh, it's inspiring me to do this over here. And like, I think it's just the way we're wired. So I've had
Yeah.
to, and I saw you have some podcast episodes on this that I'm excited to
Yes.
dig into, but time management tools.
Mm,
Like, I need
mhm.
to learn how to do like batch working. And like, I've been
Yeah.
trying to be intentional in that. But I think I know you offer some stuff on that. So I'm
Yeah.
excited to dig in.
Yeah, we have an episode specifically on boundaries that I did, and I'll put that link in the show notes. And then there's a
Okay.
different episode about my favorite tools for managing my time. And it's a learning process, like you said. It's always a journey, and as some
Yeah.
days I do better than others. But I think also our personality plays a huge role in this because, like you said,
Yes.
your husband is more structured naturally and more logical. and you're more of the creative, go with the flow type. And,
Yeah.
those different types can manage work differently. So
Yeah.
you have
Yeah.
to find what will
And
work for you.
find what works for you and find when you excel, when your brain power is like high. Like I know I love writing at night.
Yep.
So I will structure my day. So, okay, my writing's going to happen at night because that's usually when I feel most inspired. And so
Yeah.
noticing those rhythms in your day too to show up.
Yeah, absolutely. All right. So if you could give advice to a younger leader, someone who's just starting out in her career or ministry world, what would you tell her?
I would tell her to hold her titles loosely because you might carry vision for a certain dream, but I think we're always in most motion, and God is always moving, and he might have called you into, like for me, oh, I wanted to be a video editor since I wanted to be in the film industry since I was like young. And if that was the only vision I held on to, I would have missed out on the life I'm walking in right now.
Mm,
So holding those titles loosely, they don't define you. Um, but just being flexible in how God's moving. And I do believe our titles, quote unquote, or our giftings will build upon one another. So I went from editing to design to art directing. So I think they all are interwoven, but don't hold so tightly onto a career goal that you miss the move of God on your life.
all right, Jenny. So as we wrap up, I always like to end with talking about the fact that leaders are learners. And I love hearing what you're learning right now. And if you have a recommendation for our listeners in terms of a book or a podcast or anything that they could pick up.
Yeah, I have been learning, I'm going to dig into your content on time management for sure.
Okay.
So I need to learn more about that, but I've been reading a lot of Donald Millard's stuff, building a story brand. He has a lot of free resources out there. So I've been really loving how he communicates and the simplicity in which he teaches, and
Yeah.
how he teaches. As I'm a communicator, I'm a marketer, so the way he teaches how to communicate is just seems so simple. So I'm trying to really refine my communication.
Yeah.
So he's been a great one. That's basically the his my favorite resource so far.
Okay.
Yeah.
Awesome. Yes. And mentioned his podcast and his book on other podcast episodes too. So
Oh,
people will
good.
definitely have to check that out.
Yeah.
Awesome. All right, Jenny, I so appreciate you taking the time to be on with us today and just all the things you've shared in your journey. I'm super excited to check out your book because I know I've seen it online and I haven't actually read it yet. So I'm going to have to pick it up.
Well,
But I'd love for you to share how people can connect with you if they want to follow you on social. And if you have a free gift or anything else that you want to share, let us know.
awesome. So my website is jennyrandle.com. Randle is Randle. And then I love Instagram. So I'm jenny.randle. So you can find me there. And I would love it if you guys are struggling with your creativity, you're really like feeling like you're not walking in full freedom. I have a creativity assessment, and it just answers the question, what's killing your creativity? So that is at jennyrandle.com/creativity quiz. And that'll help you pinpoint things we touched on, like perfectionism, people pleasing, time management. That'll really help you zero in how God can help you overcome the thing that's killing your creativity, so you can lead from a place of understanding that God-given creative nature.
Awesome. And we will have all the links to that in the show notes for this episode. So be sure to head over there and check it out. So thanks again, Jenny, for joining us today on the podcast. And I really enjoyed our conversation.
Thanks for having me.
Thanks for joining us on the Christian Women Leadership Podcast. Do you want to become a more confident leader? Then make sure to grab the Confident Leader Manifesto. This is a resource that Holly and I developed just for you. And I share all about it in episode 6, Leading with Confidence. You can get the manifesto for yourself at estherlittlefield.com/confident. And that's confident with a T. Now don't forget, your leadership matters. And it's time for you to embrace your gifts and lead with confidence.